Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Flayvor Sessions. I'm Tari, your host, and just gonna take a minute out here. I know I've been absent for the past couple of weeks, but forgive me, I did have a sudden death in the family that I needed to take care of. So I have been working with that. But thank you so much for being here and listening on today. And I have a really fun topic on today, something that I love. And we're going to be talking about cooking in anime. And I know it's unexpected and you might be thinking, okay, where is this going? But stay with me. I promise you this one is going to be good. Because if you've ever watched an anime food scene and thought, why does that look better than most real food I've seen? Or why does this make me hungry and I just ate? And even asking, why does this animated bowl of noodles look like it has more soul than my leftovers? Well, you're not imagining it. Anime food feels magical. Not because it's fantasy, it's because it's actually rooted in real cooking principles, whether you know it or not. And even more than that, anime reminds us of something many of us have slowly lost: the joy in cooking, the joy of eating, the curiosity around ingredients. So today we're going to talk about why anime food feels so special, what it gets right about cooking, how much of it is based on real technique, and what home cooks can steal from it. Now pay attention to that one. And I'm not talking about you cooking like an anime character. I'm not talking about that. But there's actual real things that you can steal from these animes. Now, one of the first things anime does differently that most food media is that it slows food down. So with present cooking shows and what have you, you see them going through the process of cooking, but a lot of times you sort of have to sit there and really pay attention, or else you're going to miss something because they are still moving in real time and they're moving quickly. Well, with anime, you don't just see the finished dish, but you get the opportunity to see hands washing rice, maybe the knife hitting a cutting board, oil shimmering in the pan, steam rising, liquids bubbling, someone tasting, pausing, and adjusting. So anime has the opportunity to make cooking really visible. And it's not rushed and it's not hacked and it's not reduced to a quick montage, but it shows cooking as a process. And that alone changes how we relate to food. Because when you watch someone take their time, you start to understand that good food doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from sequence, from order, from attention. And that's very flavor-like what we discuss at Flayvor. So it also reminds us of the joy of eating. And so let's talk about the outrageous reactions, especially if you have ever seen Food Wars. But you have people levitating, eyes glowing, tears forming, clothes flying off, and whole flashback sequences, and I call that the ratatouille moment, that are triggered by just one bite. And it's funny, but it's also very symbolic. Anime just isn't saying this food tastes good. Anime is saying food can move you, food can comfort you, it can surprise you, and it can make you feel cared for. And somewhere along the way, many of us stopped expecting our food to do that. It just became fuel, a task, a box to check off, or something just to rush through. Anime brings back wonder in food, and it reminds us that eating can still be an experience. And that doesn't mean that your every meal has to be perfect, but meals are allowed to be joyful. They're allowed to be exciting, and they're allowed to be meaningful. And another thing anime does beautifully is that ingredients are not treated as just fixed items. They are not, this is the ingredient and that's it. Rather, they are treated as, what could this become? Characters smell the ingredient, they touch them, taste them, cook them in multiple ways, fail sometimes, but then they try again. And that curiosity really is everything. And that's what we're doing in real life, or what we should be doing in real life. Thinking about how this ingredient can be transformed, or how can we pull out the flavors in this ingredient. Because flavor literacy doesn't come from memorizing recipes, and I've said this many times. It comes from asking those questions. Like, what happens if I roast this instead of boiling it? What happens if I add my fat first? Or what happens if I layer seasoning instead of dumping it all in at the end? So anime encourages exploration. And I really do believe that is the heart of cooking. Across almost every cooking-focused anime, you'll sort of see the same pattern. Cooking is shown as building a base, layering flavor, respecting heat and time, tasting, and adjusting. They're not just throwing everything in at once. And they're not relying on one magic ingredient, and they're not chasing trends. But they are working through a sequence. And that sequence helps to create depth. And depth is part of what makes food feel really special. So now I'm going to go through some particular anime that I've seen, and we're just going to talk about what they are doing. So let's see, a couple are recent, probably within this last anime season, this last year. One is really old, and then one is about middle of the road. So the first one is Campfire Cooking in Another World. And this one shows how powerful simple food can be. The ingredients are basic. The character is getting a lot of their ingredients from a convenience store, so to speak. And the ingredients that they are getting are using are meat, vegetables, they're using salt, they're using fat and broth. They're actually hunting for the meat, so this is wild game, I guess you could say. But they're also using a lot of condiments that they're getting from the store. This show consistently emphasizes method. Oil heating before it goes into the pan, your aromatics softening, broth simmering, seasoning in stages. And it teaches something important, that simple food isn't bland. Simple food can become special through technique. And you don't need rare ingredients. You just need an understanding of those techniques and how those techniques are able to draw out the different flavors in the food. Now, I know I talk often about flavor, but technique is a tool that you're using to draw out flavor. And I think this is what this show does pretty well, again, with simple foods. Now, Delicious in Dungeon. Campfire Cooking in Another World shows us how powerful simple technique can be, but once you accept that ingredients respond to method, And there's another question starts to show up, and that is, what happens when the ingredient itself is unfamiliar? What happens when you can't rely on tradition? And this is where Delicious in Dungeon steps in. They take the idea of ingredient behavior even further. And they talk about how the different ingredients need different methods. Some of the ingredients want long, slow cooking. Others want quick, high heat. Some might release fat. Others might release water. Some tighten when overcooked, and some soften with time. So this show consistently asks what part of the ingredient is edible, what method fits its texture, and what makes this safe and delicious. And that is really sort of advanced cooking thinking, very ingredient forward. Now we're going to talk more about ingredients with Tariko. And Tariko doesn't necessarily show you a cooking process, but the thing that it gets right is its reverence for ingredients. Tariko ingredients are treated as treasure, not commodities, not shortcuts, but living things with potential. And you don't create flavor from nothing. You unlock flavor that already exists in these ingredients. And that shift changes how you cook. You stop trying to overpower the ingredient and you start collaborating with the ingredient. And I think this is something Tariko does very well, even though it is really sort of funny, but the reverence for the ingredient is very high because they realize without good ingredients, you're not going to get a good flavor, because flavor starts in those ingredients. And not saying, once again, that these have to be rare ingredients or something very exotic. You're just looking for quality in an ingredient. Now, when you start seeing ingredients as valuable and you start understanding how they behave, the next step is learning how to design them on purpose. And this is where Food Wars comes in. And this one is a very familiar anime for most people. Is one of the top cooking anime, I should say. And I see why it is, because it is remembered for its theatrics. So, clothes flying off people when they taste the food. But underneath all of that is doing something much deeper. Food Wars is not just about technique. It's about understanding the ingredients and the properties of the ingredients. Characters aren't only asking, how do I cook this? They're asking, what does this ingredient naturally do? What brings out its sweetness? What highlights the umami in it? What balances its bitterness? What changes when I apply heat? And what changes when I add fat? What happens when I combine these two things? And that should sound familiar, because that's relational cooking, and that's what we're talking about at Flayvor. Your ingredients don't just stand alone, but they interact with other ingredients. They have relationships. So fat draws out aroma, acid brightens, and salt amplifies. So while Food Wars absolutely highlights technique is the tool, and that's what I said before. Understanding ingredient behavior is the real power. Food Wars also shows something else really important, and that no one becomes great alone. And I actually love this because they have their research groups, study sessions, their rivals, people tasting each other's food, giving feedback. They fail publicly, but they try again. And this just proves how communal cooking is. And your skill grows faster in a community. Curiosity becomes greater when it's shared. And that mirrors what we're doing at Flayvor. So I suppose this is why I like it so much, because we are trying to create community for you guys where you can upskill yourselves, where you can ask questions, where you can be curious. If you want to do research, do your research and share it with the community. But we are trying to build a shared flavored language. So I know you're wondering, okay, well, that's all well and good, and that's all in anime, and that's awesome. But how does that apply to me in real life? Well, okay, let's talk about that. This is not just theoretical. There are real cooks that have been inspired by anime and manga. Nadine Estero comes to mind. She recreates anime-inspired dishes and translates them into real cookable recipes. In fact, she has a cookbook. And another chef, Sho Kwang-hyo, and I hope I got his name correctly. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Sho Kwang-hyo has shared that manga and anime helped spark his interest in cooking. And he has actually incited Food Wars as being very influential in that. So these chefs became inspired by what they were seeing, and it led to curiosity. And curiosity leads to practice, and practice leads to skill. So anime helped create a pathway for them. And, once again, these are real techniques that are being shown in these animes. And so this creating inspiration and curiosity, and can I really do this in real life? And people are trying to recreate these dishes. And in recreating these dishes, they are upskilling. They are learning, and they are becoming better cooks. Now, why does anime food feel so emotional? Well, it's tied to care, effort, sharing, survival, and community. People are cooking for each other. They eat together. They remember meals. And the food is communication. It says, I see you. I thought about you. And I took time. And maybe that's why, anime food hits so deep. So home cooks, what can you steal from anime? You don't need the anime recipes, but you do need the mindset. You need to slow down one step. Become curious. See what that ingredient can do. And in slowing down, let your onions soften. Let your tomato paste toast, your broth simmer, and cook in layers. Your fat, aromatics, spices or paste, main ingredient, liquid, and your finish. Taste midway. Respect texture. Know that crunch and creaminess, even chew, matters. Texture is half of your flavor. These are the things that you can steal from these anime shows. And anime doesn't romanticize perfection. What it romanticizes is attention. Good cooking isn't about being a chef. It's about paying attention. And that's learnable. So in closing, anime reminds us that cooking is human. It's messy, curious, imperfect, but it can also be joyful and sometimes magical. And when you understand it, you stop cooking in fear. You cook with confidence. And that is what I want most for you. So thank you for listening. And as always, thank you for tasting bravely. And I will see you in the next Flayvor session.